Since AHEAD released its documentation guidance information, one of the common questions that has been presented is, well, how do I translate that information into an office policy? What might my website documentation policy look like? What I want to do with this video is to very quickly break down the quick review of the AHEAD documentation guidance information and then talk about how to translate that into your office web policy. So in review, the AHEAD documentation guidance talks about 3 levels. The primary level is that the office should speak with the student first and foremost, that the student is the most valuable resource in the accommodation exploration process, that initial conversation with the student is really valued above and beyond anything else, that's the most rich source of information that we can get. Now we know that information doesn't have to be taken and fully implemented into practice. Not everything a student may discuss is necessarily going to be reasonable in terms of accommodations, but we have to give the student the opportunity to share their thoughts and their concerns first and foremost. From there, that second level, as referenced in the AHEAD guidance information, is to talk about the opportunity for us as professionals to have informed judgment, to make some assessments about that information that's being presented to us, and to start thinking about what might be reasonable accommodations just based on the information that the student has shared. And then from there, the third level would be that tertiary level that talks about bringing in that external documentation, the common information that we think of from maybe a psychologist or a medical provider that can add additional information as necessary. So if we look at that and then translate that into a web policy, I think it really follows those 3 steps. The first step that should be there if a student were to go to your website and look at the policy should say and should communicate something to the effect of that your office wants to talk to the student first and foremost, whether or not the student even has documentation in hand, that you value that conversation, you want to have the chance to speak with them and to essentially hear their story. And then from there you may have some sort of reference that you would be making in the office, some sort of informed judgment and assessments and having some dialogue with the student, with other folks on campus to determine reasonable accommodations. And if you need additional information at that point, you would request external documentation specific to the student's situation and specific to the needs that they brought to the office. So we're not focused on documentation that is relevant to the policy, but instead we're focused on documentation that is relevant to the student's particular situation. So in review, I would say have the policy set up to where it says that this conversation is valued first and foremost, some informed judgment, and then bringing in documentation as necessary.